I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Karen Whitmore marching toward my house. She had that HOA dictator energy, tight-lipped, arms crossed, HOA handbook clutched like it was the Bible. I barely had time to step off my ladder before she started talking. "This," she said, jabbing a finger at my freshly painted house, "is unacceptable." I glanced at the new paint job, a rich, warm terracotta. It looked fantastic. My wife and I had spent weeks choosing the perfect color. I frowned. "What's the problem?" Karen scoffed. "It's too bold." I raised an eyebrow. "Too bold?" She sniffed. "It's not in line with the community aesthetic. We have a certain standard here." There it was. That thinly veiled HOA code for not white enough. Because here's the thing, our neighborhood? All beige and gray. And my wife? Mexican-American. I already knew where this was going. So I crossed my arms. "And where in the HOA guidelines does it say warm colors are banned?" Karen's lips tightened. "Well," she said, "it's an unwritten rule." I laughed. "An unwritten rule?" I repeated. "You mean one that doesn't exist?" Karen's face twitched. "This is a historic neighborhood," she snapped. "We maintain a classic look." "And your house," she said, saying it like it was contaminated, "stands out too much." I tilted my head. "Funny," I said. "Because 3 houses down, Steve painted his house blue last year. And nobody said a word." Karen's face turned red. That's different." "Sure, different. Because Steve? White. And me? Not." I exhaled through my nose. "Karen, I followed every HOA guideline. You don't have a case here." She smiled. The kind of fake, condescending smile that only an HOA Karen could master. "Oh, we'll see about that," she said. "Expect an official notice." And with that, she turned on her heel and marched away. I sighed. Here we go. 2 days later, I found the HOA letter taped to my door. It was so predictable I almost laughed. "Notice of violation. Dear homeowner, your recent exterior painting has been deemed non-compliant with community aesthetic standards. You are required to repaint your home in an approved neutral color within 30 days. Asterisk failure to comply may result in daily fines, legal action, or HOA-mandated corrective measures. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore, HOA President." I showed it to my wife. She read it, then looked up at me. "She's really doing this?" I smirked. "Oh, she thinks she is." Because what Karen didn't know was that my dad was a federal judge, and she had just declared legal war on the wrong damn family. That night, I called my dad. I read him the HOA violation letter word for word. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, he chuckled. "Son," he said, "is she really trying to enforce an unwritten rule?" "Oh yeah," I said. "And she's threatening fines if I don't correct it." My dad sighed. "I've seen a lot of legal stupidity in my career, but this is special." I grinned. "So, what do we do?" He chuckled. "We're going to bury her." The next morning, Karen got a response. A formal legal letter. From my dad's office. And when I say formal, I mean terrifyingly official. From Honorable Judge Robert, last name. To Karen Whitmore, HOA President. Dear Ms. Whitmore, it has come to my attention that you have issued a violation notice to my son, my name, demanding that he repaint his home based on an unwritten rule. This demand is legally unenforceable. The HOA's bylaws contain no such restriction, and any attempt to impose one retroactively would constitute a clear case of selective enforcement and discrimination. This is a violation of both state property laws and federal housing protections. If you do not immediately revoke this baseless violation and cease further harassment, I will personally ensure that legal action is taken against both you and the HOA for *discriminatory practices and abuse of authority. Consider this your only warning. Sincerely, Judge Robert, last name. Now, the thing about HOA dictators like Karen? They love throwing legal threats around. Until someone fights back. And Karen had just picked a fight with a federal judge. The next morning, I saw Karen hovering near my mailbox. Her usual smug expression? Gone. Instead, she looked nervous, like someone who had poked the wrong bear. I casually walked up. "Morning, Karen," I said, smiling. Her mouth twitched. Got a letter," she said stiffly. I shrugged. "Oh, from my dad?" She forced a tight laugh. "I didn't realize he was a judge." I grinned. "Yeah. Wild, huh?" She swallowed. "Look, maybe we can, come to a compromise?" I tilted my head. "Oh, I don't know, Karen. You seemed really confident about your case 2 days ago." Karen's face turned red. I might have been a bit hasty." I pulled out my own letter. A formal HOA complaint. Filed against her. For harassment, abuse of power, and selective enforcement. Her eyes widened. You're filing a complaint against me?" I smiled. "Oh, Karen, we're just getting started." Karen was cornered, and she knew it. But if there was one thing I had learned about HOA tyrants, they never admit defeat. So, instead of backing down, she called an emergency HOA meeting. Her goal? To rally support against me. Her mistake? Underestimating how much everyone already hated her. The meeting room was packed. Homeowners were whispering. Everyone had heard about my dad's letter. Karen stood at the podium, trying to regain control. "We need to discuss a serious violation in our community," she announced. Someone in the back snickered. She shot them a glare. Then she turned to me. "My name has painted his house a non-compliant color, which goes against our community's historic standards," she said stiffly. Tom, my neighbor, raised his hand. "What historic standards? That's not in the HOA rules." Karen ignored him. "This isn't just about one house," she continued. "If we allow this, we open the door to chaos. Next, we'll have purple houses." The crowd erupted in laughter. "Oh no, not purple. We must protect the suburban order. Call the National Guard." Karen's face turned red. She was losing control. So she pulled out her final weapon. She cleared her throat. "I have already begun legal proceedings against my name for his failure to comply," she announced smugly. The room fell silent. Then, I stood up, and I dropped the nuke. "Actually, Karen," I said, "your legal claim is dead on arrival." She scoffed. "You don't know that." I pulled out a folder. "This," I said, waving it, "is an official response from my father, Judge Robert, last name." The room gasped. I read it out loud. "Ms. Whitmore's claims are unenforceable under HOA law. Any attempt to proceed with legal action will result in immediate countersuits for discrimination, abuse of power, and harassment." I smiled. "And this part is my favorite. Should this matter reach litigation, I will personally oversee a federal investigation into HOA practices within this neighborhood." The room erupted. "Oh, damn. Karen, you done for." "He got his dad involved?" "El Mayo." Karen's face drained of color. She stammered. That's intimidation." I smirked. "No, Karen. That's the law." And just like that, the entire room turned against her. Karen lost it. "This isn't fair," she shrieked. "He's abusing his connections." Alan, the HOA vice president, stood up. "Karen," he said, rubbing his temples, "you literally tried to find someone based on an unwritten rule." The crowd murmured in agreement. Lisa crossed her arms. "Yeah. And isn't Steve's house blue? Why didn't he get a fine?" Karen stammered. That's different." Lisa smirked. "Because he's white?" Karen's eye twitched. The room fell into silence. And then, someone clapped. Slow, sarcastic. Tom. And then, the whole damn room joined in. A mocking, humiliating applause. Karen turned purple. "I will sue all of you," she screeched. Alan sighed. "Karen, please leave the podium. You can't do this to me." Alan looked at the board. "I propose a vote to remove Karen as HOA president." Karen froze. "What?" The vote? Unanimous. Karen was officially removed. For good. She stood there, shaking with rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed. And then, she stormed out. The next morning, I walked outside and saw it. Karen had dumped a bucket of white paint on my driveway. A final act of petty revenge. I sighed. Then, I checked my security cameras. Clear as day. Karen at 2 a.m. committing vandalism. I smiled. And I made one final call. By noon, 2 cops knocked on her door. She answered in a robe, looking half asleep. The moment she saw the officers, she panicked. "Ma'am," one of them said, "we have video evidence of you committing vandalism on private property." Karen's eyes widened. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer continued. Karen screamed. "I'm being targeted. This is a conspiracy." The officers ignored her. They cuffed her. And the whole neighborhood watched. Tom recorded the whole thing. Karen kicking, screaming, and getting shoved into a police cruiser. It was beautiful. And the best part? Lisa printed a still image of Karen getting arrested and framed it in the HOA clubhouse. A month later, the HOA had new leadership. No more racist, petty BS. No more Karen-style dictators. The neighborhood? Better than ever. And me? I got one last surprise in the mail. A gift from my dad. A custom plaque, engraved on the front. The HOA Slayer, undefeated champion of homeowner rights. I laughed. Because damn it, I earned it. And if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. A month after Karen's arrest for vandalizing my driveway, life was finally peaceful. Until I got a text from Lisa. "Dude, check Facebook." Now, I opened my phone, and my jaw dropped. Karen had started a GoFundMe. Help me fight injustice. Wrongfully arrested by corrupt HOA. The page had a dramatic, blurry photo of Karen looking pathetic in court. And the description? "I have been a victim of a corrupt legal system, targeted by an HOA conspiracy and a powerful, abusive judge. I am raising funds to take my case to the Supreme Court and restore justice." I burst out laughing. Karen? Taking her case to the Supreme Court? For throwing paint on my driveway? Oh, this was going to be good. At first, nobody took Karen's GoFundMe seriously. But then, it went viral. Free Karen. She's a victim of elitist corruption. This judge's son is abusing his power. This is why HOAs are dangerous. She's a fighter. We have to support her. Somehow, Karen had tricked a bunch of idiots into thinking she was a political prisoner. And within 2 days, she had raised over $8,000. Lisa called me, barely able to contain her laughter. "Bro," she said, "Karen actually got gullible Facebook Karens to fund her legal battle." I grinned. Oh, she can raise all the money she wants. It won't change the law. But Karen didn't care about the law. She wanted revenge. A week later, my dad got a legal notice from Karen's new lawyer. And you'll never guess who it was. Richard. Yes, that Richard. The same corrupt HOA lawyer I had taken down months ago. Now, he was representing Karen. And the lawsuit was the dumbest thing I'd ever seen. Plaintiff, Karen Whitmore. Defendant, Judge Robert, last name. Allegations: abuse of judicial power, defamation of character, unlawful harassment, and wrongful arrest. Seeking $2.5 million in damages. I stared at the paper. Then I cracked up. Karen was suing my dad for getting arrested for a crime she literally committed on camera. Oh, this was going to be fun. 3 weeks later, we were in court. Karen was out on bail, sitting next to Richard, looking smug. My dad looked bored. The judge, not my dad, obviously, leaned forward. "Ms. Whitmore," he sighed, "you are suing a sitting federal judge." "Over what exactly?" Karen stood up dramatically. "Your Honor," she said, her voice shaking, "I have been persecuted. I was targeted by a vindictive legal system for simply enforcing HOA rules." The judge raised an eyebrow. "You were arrested for vandalizing private property." Karen flinched. That was a protest," she insisted. The judge looked at Richard. "Mr. Dawson, do you have any actual legal argument?" Richard adjusted his tie. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "we believe the arrest was politically motivated." Judge, last name, intimidated my client, and she was unfairly punished for a minor act of civil disobedience. The judge nodded. Then he turned to our lawyer. Mr. Patterson, he said, do you have a response? David, our lawyer, stood up, and he brought the hammer down. David smirked. Yes, Your Honor. First, we have video evidence of Ms. Whitmore committing the crime. He pulled out a USB drive and handed it to the bailiff. Karen stiffened. The courtroom screen lit up. There she was, dumping white paint on my driveway at 2 a.m. The courtroom snickered. Karen sank in her seat. David continued. Second, Ms. Whitmore's lawsuit is a frivolous attempt at retaliation. He turned to the judge. We are filing a motion for dismissal, with prejudice, along with a request for sanctions. The judge sighed. Then he looked at Karen. Ms. Whitmore, this case is ridiculous. I am dismissing it with prejudice. Karen's face went white. Additionally, the judge continued, I am ordering a full review of your GoFundMe campaign. If any fraudulent fundraising occurred, you could be facing charges for wire fraud. Karen gasped. What? But the judge was done with her. He slammed the gavel. Case dismissed. Karen was officially ruined. The fallout was beautiful. Heavy checkmark her lawsuit was dismissed. Heavy checkmark her GoFundMe was flagged for fraud. Heavy checkmark she was fined for filing a frivolous lawsuit. Heavy checkmark, and worst of all, her remaining supporters abandoned her. 2 weeks later, she vanished. No social media. No more insane legal threats. No more Karen nonsense. Just silence. The HOA never recovered from her disastrous leadership. And me? I was finally free. For real this time. A month later, I got one last surprise. A package in the mail. Inside was a gold plaque. The HOA Slayer, undefeated in court, online, and real life. No return address. Just a sticky note attached. A gift from the neighborhood. You earned it. I laughed. Because damn it, I did. And if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. With Karen gone, I thought the HOA would finally chill out. No insane fines. No power-hungry board members. No threats of legal action over petty nonsense. And for a few months, things were quiet. Too quiet. Then, one day, a letter from the HOA arrived. Exciting changes coming to the neighborhood. Dear homeowners, in our efforts to maintain the prestige and value of our community, the HOA is undergoing a rebranding. This includes new leadership, updated property standards, stronger enforcement of HOA regulations. We look forward to your cooperation as we take our community to the next level. Sincerely, HOA President James Caldwell. I frowned. Who the hell was James Caldwell? At the next HOA meeting, I got my answer. James Caldwell stood at the podium, wearing a crisp gray suit and an unsettlingly perfect smile. Unlike Karen, who was a loud, bumbling HOA tyrant, James was dangerous in a different way. He was calm, polished, professional. The kind of guy who could sell you a garbage dump and convince you it was a luxury resort. He smiled at the crowd. Good evening, everyone, he said smoothly. I'm honored to be your new HOA president. The room murmured. Lisa leaned over to me. I don't trust this guy. Neither did I. James adjusted his tie. I believe in order, structure, discipline. I rolled my eyes. Here we go. And then he dropped the bombshell. Which is why, he continued, I am proposing a new policy. He pulled out a folder. Starting next month, we will be reevaluating property values to ensure they align with our new community standards. I froze. Because I knew exactly what that meant. James wasn't here to maintain order. He was here to force people out. A week later, Lisa got a notice in the mail. Mandatory property review. Dear homeowner, following a recent assessment, your property has been flagged for noncompliance with updated HOA standards. You must complete the following upgrades within 60 days. New roofing, $12,000 estimate. Updated driveway paving, $8,000 estimate. Exterior repainting, $5,000 estimate. Failure to comply may result in fines, liens, or legal action. Sincerely, HOA President James Caldwell. Lisa was livid. She stormed over to my house, waving the letter. Can he even do this? She fumed. I scanned the letter, and my stomach dropped. Because this wasn't just a normal HOA fine. This was a setup. James was trying to financially strangle homeowners until they were forced to sell. And guess who had been buying up houses in the neighborhood? A real estate development firm. One that James used to work for. This wasn't just HOA enforcement. This was a corporate takeover. And I was going to stop it. I did some digging. And what I found was worse than I thought. Heavy checkmark James Caldwell was a former VP at Crestline Development, a company that specialized in revitalizing neighborhoods by forcing out original homeowners. Heavy checkmark the HOA board had quietly changed the bylaws to allow mandatory property updates. Heavy checkmark half the homes in the neighborhood had already been flagged for noncompliance. This was bigger than Karen. This wasn't about stupid power trips. This was about money. Millions of dollars. And James had just declared war on the wrong person. I called my dad. Hey, I said. I think I found an HOA scam. I sent him the documents. He read them. Then he laughed. Son, he said, this is textbook fraud. My dad called up his legal team. And within a week, we hit James with a formal legal challenge. Notice of legal objection. To HOA President James Caldwell. Your recent policy changes constitute a violation of both state and federal housing laws. Specifically, illegal enforcement of retroactive HOA rules, collusion with private developers, financial coercion of homeowners. Failure to cease these unlawful practices will result in legal action, federal investigation, and a class action lawsuit. Sincerely, Judge Robert, last name, and legal team. The moment James got the letter, he panicked. At the next HOA meeting, James was visibly shaken. Gee, good evening, everyone, he stammered. Tom grinned. Oh, you sound nervous, James. Everything okay? James forced a smile. Due to recent legal concerns, he said, adjusting his tie, we are pausing the property reassessments. The room exploded. So it was a scam. You were trying to force us out. Resign, you clown. James sweated. I assure you. Lisa stood up. James, I move to vote you out as HOA president. Effective immediately. James froze. Alan, the HOA vice president, sighed. I second that motion. The vote? Unanimous. And just like that, James was out. For good. After James' humiliating exit, the HOA was finally normal. Heavy checkmark no more forced property updates. Heavy checkmark no more developer scams. Heavy checkmark no more HOA dictators. The neighborhood? Saved. And me? I got one last surprise. A gift from Lisa and Tom. A gold plaque. Engraved on the front. The HOA Slayer, undefeated against corruption. I laughed. Because damn it. I earned it. And if another HOA villain ever tried to rise? Well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. After I took down James Caldwell and his developer scam, the HOA was finally clean. Or so I thought. Then, one morning, I got a letter in the mail. Not just any letter. A fine. Heavy checkmark $50. Excessive trash can exposure. My trash cans were out for 15 extra minutes. Heavy checkmark $75. Lawn noncompliance. My grass was half an inch too long. Heavy checkmark $100. Unapproved mailbox color. It was the same damn mailbox I had for years. I laughed. Because this was personal. The HOA was coming after me. And they had no idea who they were messing with. I stormed into the next HOA meeting, letter in hand. Lisa and Tom were already there, shaking their heads. Looks like they're targeting you, Tom muttered. At the front of the room, a new HOA president stood up. His name? Philip Grant. He was polished, professional, and slimy as hell. Welcome, everyone, Philip said smoothly. As your new HOA president, I'm here to ensure rules are followed. I raised my hand. Philip, I said, waving my ridiculous fine letter. Do you care to explain why I've suddenly been hit with 3 violations in 1 week? Philip smiled. A cold, corporate smile. Mister, my last name. You're simply being held accountable to the same standards as everyone else. The room murmured. Lisa crossed her arms. Funny, I don't remember anyone ever getting a fine for a mailbox before. Philip adjusted his tie. The HOA has decided to enforce all rules more strictly moving forward. Tom snorted. Against one person? Philip ignored him. But I knew what this was. This wasn't about HOA rules. This was revenge. And Philip had just made a huge mistake. Lisa did some digging. And what she found was worse than we thought. Heavy checkmark. Philip wasn't just the HOA president, he was a lawyer. Heavy checkmark. The HOA had created a new code enforcement committee, and guess who was at the top of their target list? Me. Heavy checkmark. They were trying to fine me until I either left or sued, so they could countersue and drain me financially. This wasn't about homeowner rules. This was a legal trap. But if Philip thought I was going to roll over, he had no idea who he was messing with. I called my dad. Hey, I said. The HOA is trying to fine me out of existence. My dad laughed. Oh, they have no idea what they just started. And within 3 days, Philip got a response letter from my dad's office. Notice of legal review. To Philip Grant, HOA president. It has come to our attention that the HOA is selectively enforcing fines against one homeowner, Mr. my last name. This constitutes targeted legal harassment, unlawful selective enforcement, abuse of HOA authority. If these actions are not immediately ceased, we will be filing for an injunction against the HOA and pursuing damages for legal harassment and retaliation. Sincerely, Judge Robert, last name, and legal team. The moment Philip got the letter, he panicked. At the next HOA meeting, Philip was sweating. Due to, legal concerns, he stammered, we will be reviewing the recent fine policies. The room murmured. Lisa smirked. So you mean dropping them because you got caught? Philip forced a smile. I assure you, we only want what's best for the community. Tom leaned forward. You tried to find a guy for his mailbox, dude. The room snickered. Philip was cracking. And then? Alan, the HOA vice president, stood up. I moved to vote Philip out as HOA president. Philip's face went white. And the vote? Unanimous. Philip was officially out. For good. After Philip's humiliating removal, the HOA board crumbled. Heavy checkmark. The Code Enforcement Committee was disbanded. Heavy checkmark. All bogus fines were refunded. Heavy checkmark. New HOA leadership was elected. Actual homeowners, not power-hungry lawyers. The neighborhood? Finally free. And me? I got one last surprise. A package in the mail. Inside? A custom trophy, engraved on the front. The HOA Slayer, undefeated against petty tyrants. No return address. Just a sticky note attached. A gift from the neighborhood. You earned it. I laughed. Because damn it, I did. And if another HOA villain ever tried to rise? Well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. Life was peaceful again. Heavy checkmark. No Karen. Heavy checkmark. No corrupt board members. Heavy checkmark. No insane fines. I thought I was finally free. Then one morning, I got a certified letter from the HOA. It was thicker than usual. I opened it, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Notice of HOA property audit. Dear homeowner, as part of our commitment to maintaining high property values, the HOA has partnered with a professional real estate auditing firm to evaluate all homes in the community. Your home has been selected for an evaluation to ensure compliance with HOA architectural standards and property guidelines. Failure to meet compliance standards may result in asterisk. Mandatory renovations at homeowner expense. Reassessment of property value and HOA fees. Potential HOA mandated sale in cases of noncompliance. Please be advised that this audit is mandatory. I read it twice. Then I did the only logical thing. I poured myself a drink. Because this wasn't an audit. This was a legal setup. Lisa and Tom came over immediately. Lisa scanned the letter. "This is insane," she muttered. "They're trying to force people to sell." Tom folded his arms. "This isn't an audit. This is a real estate scam." And they were right. Because I did some digging. Heavy checkmark. The HOA had hired Everwood Auditing, a shell company. Heavy checkmark. The CEO of Everwood? A former real estate developer. Heavy checkmark. Homes flagged as non-compliant would be pressured into selling, and guess who was already buying properties? A new corporate investor group. Translation? The HOA was now working with outside investors to force people out. They wanted to take over the neighborhood. And guess who was on the board of directors for the scheme? Philip. The same corrupt HOA president I had taken down before. He was back. And now? He was trying to take me down, for real this time. I called my dad. "They're pulling a forced property reassessment scam," I explained. He was silent for a moment. Then he chuckled. "Son," he said, "it's time to end this HOA for good." And within 3 days, Philip got a legal response. From my dad's office. Notice of immediate legal challenge. 2. Philip Grant and the HOA board. Your recent property audit initiative constitutes *. Unlawful forced property reassessments. Fraudulent partnership with a shell company. Illegal financial coercion of homeowners. If these actions are not ceased immediately, we will pursue *. A federal injunction against the HOA. A class action lawsuit for damages. A full state-level investigation into HOA financial fraud. You have 48 hours to comply. The moment Philip got the letter, he lost it. That night, I got a surprise visitor. Philip. Standing on my porch. Looking pale. "Listen," he said. "Maybe we can work something out." I grinned. "You mean, maybe you can avoid getting sued into oblivion?" Philip swallowed. "It was just a business opportunity," he muttered. "Nothing personal." I laughed. "Oh, Philip," I said, shaking my head. "It's very personal." And then? I slammed the door in his face. Because tomorrow, the real war began. Within a week, the case was in court. And the judge was not amused. "Mr. Grant," the judge said, "this is outright fraud." Philip sweated. The evidence was stacked against him. Heavy checkmark. The shell company connection? Exposed. Heavy checkmark. The investor group's secret land grab? Confirmed. Heavy checkmark. The illegal forced property reassessments? Shown in court. Philip tried to backtrack. "Your Honor, we were only..." The judge held up a hand. "I'm placing an immediate injunction on all HOA audits. Any further violations will result in civil and criminal penalties." Philip's face turned white. And just like that, the HOA was finished. The next HOA meeting was legendary. Philip tried to save face. "Obviously, we made some errors," he said. The room booed. Alan, the HOA vice president, stood up. "I move to dissolve the HOA permanently." The room cheered. The vote? Unanimous. And just like that, the HOA was gone. Forever. With the HOA officially dead, life was finally normal. Heavy checkmark. No Karen. Heavy checkmark. No Philip. Heavy checkmark. No HOA corruption. Just peace. And me? I got one last surprise. A custom trophy, engraved on the front. The HOA Slayer, final boss defeated. Lisa and Tom burst out laughing. "You actually ended an entire HOA," Tom said. I grinned. Damn right I did. And if another HOA ever tried to rise? Well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. All right. Since the HOA has been completely destroyed, Karen is long gone, and Philip has been legally obliterated, you'd think the war was over. But what if a new enemy rises, not an HOA, but someone worse? Let's introduce the final boss of neighborhood insanity. With the HOA dead, the neighborhood finally belonged to the homeowners. No more fines. No more corruption. No more power-hungry board members. And for the first time in years, everything was normal. Until one day, I saw a sold sign go up on the biggest house in the neighborhood. A house that had been sitting vacant for months. And the new owner? No one had ever seen them. Not once. Lisa knocked on my door. "Have you seen the new neighbor?" she asked. I shook my head. Not a single time. Tom leaned against my fence. Dude, this feels off. No one saw a moving truck. No contractors. No signs of life. But somehow, they bought the biggest house in cash. And then, things got weird. Over the next few weeks, the empty house started showing strange signs of life. Heavy checkmark expensive black SUVs started showing up at random hours. Heavy checkmark security cameras appeared on every corner of the house, way too many for a normal homeowner. Heavy checkmark people in suits were seen coming and going, but never the actual owner. And then, we got the letter. One morning, Lisa ran over, waving an envelope. You have to see this. She handed me the letter. It was from a law firm. Cease and desist notice. To the residents of neighborhood name. Our client, the new owner of address, has expressed concerns regarding excessive neighborhood surveillance and trespassing near their property. Effective immediately, all homeowners are required to refrain from taking photos or videos of the residents, asking questions about the property's ownership, discussing the owner's identity in any public forum. Failure to comply may result in legal action for harassment and defamation. Sincerely, Wexler and Associates, Legal Counsel. I read it twice. Then I did the only logical thing. I left. Is this a joke? Tom muttered. Lisa shook her head. They're literally threatening the entire neighborhood for being curious? That's when I realized. Whoever had moved in. They weren't just rich. They were dangerous. I started researching the new owner. Heavy checkmark the house was purchased under a shell company. Heavy checkmark the company had zero history, created just a month before the sale. Heavy checkmark the law firm that sent the letter, specialized in high-profile privacy cases. Lisa frowned at my laptop. So, we have a mystery billionaire who doesn't want anyone knowing they exist? I leaned back. Or, I said, we have someone hiding from something bigger. Tom crossed his arms. Only one way to find out. And that's when we decided. We were going to figure out who the hell our new neighbor really was. Lisa, Tom, and I did what any reasonable adults would do. We conducted a full-scale neighborhood stakeout. Heavy checkmark Tom parked his truck at the end of the street with binoculars. Heavy checkmark Lisa monitored security cameras from her phone. Heavy checkmark I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee watching. And then, at exactly 2:17 a.m., a convoy of black SUVs pulled into the house. 6 of them. No headlights. No noise. Just silent movement. Lisa whispered, "Okay, this is officially creepy." And then, a man stepped out of the SUV. Tall. Expensive suit. Military-style haircut. And next to him, armed security. Tom cursed under his breath. "Bro," he whispered, "who the hell did we just move in next to?" And that's when we realized. We weren't dealing with an HOA villain anymore. We were dealing with something much bigger. Lisa did more digging. And finally, we found something. The shell company that bought the house? It was linked to a defense contractor. One with ties to government black ops. And the man we saw? A former intelligence officer. Tom whistled. We just went from HOA drama to full-on CIA-level insanity. And then, another letter arrived. This time, delivered by hand. By a man in a suit. I opened the door. A tall man in a black suit and earpiece stared at me. "Mister, my last name," he said, "we need to talk." I crossed my arms. "And you are?" He handed me a business card. It had no name. Just a phone number. "You need to stop asking questions about the property," he said, his voice cold. I smirked. "Or what? You'll find me for my trash cans?" His expression didn't change. "This isn't an HOA matter," he said. "It's a security matter." My smirk faded. The man stepped closer. "You don't want to be involved in this." And just like that, he turned and walked away. Lisa and Tom ran up. "What the hell was that?" Lisa whispered. I turned to them. And I said the only thing I could. "I think we just found the final boss of the neighborhood." Lisa, Tom, and I stood in my living room, staring at the nameless business card the man in black had handed me. No name, no title, just a phone number. Lisa exhaled. "So, what do we do?" Tom smirked. "Call them, obviously." I turned the card over in my hands. Every instinct told me, do not get involved. But my curiosity wouldn't let me walk away. So I picked up my phone and I dialed. The phone rang once, twice. Then, a click. A voice answered, calm, professional, and cold as ice. You were warned to stop asking questions. I blinked. You're going to have to be more specific, I said. I ask a lot of questions. A pause. Then, this is your final warning. The call disconnected. I stared at my phone. Lisa paled. Well, that's terrifying. Tom grinned. Dude, we just got a threat from the actual government. This is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. I ran a hand down my face. Tom, focus. We had two options. 1, drop it and move on. 2, dig deeper and find out what the hell was going on. We all looked at each other. And, of course, we chose option 2. We needed information. Heavy checkmark, we knew the house was bought under a fake company. Heavy checkmark, we knew men in suits kept showing up. Heavy checkmark, we knew they didn't want us snooping. So, we did the only logical thing. We decided to sneak onto the property. Tom smirked. This is the most fun I've had since we got Karen arrested. Lisa groaned. We're going to die. But she didn't back out. Because deep down, she wanted to know the truth just as much as we did. At 2 a.m., we made our move. Heavy checkmark Lisa stayed back to monitor cameras. Heavy checkmark Tom and I wore black hoodies and snuck through the backyard. Heavy checkmark we disabled the motion sensor with a signal jammer Tom borrowed from his uncle. And then, we slipped through a gap in the fence. The backyard was empty. No furniture. No signs of life. Just a perfectly manicured lawn and a single metal door leading into the house. Tom nudged me. Door's got a keypad. No handle. High security. I frowned. This isn't a house. This is a safe house. Lisa's voice crackled in my earpiece. Guys, she whispered. We have a big problem. I tensed. What? She exhaled. 2 black SUVs just pulled up to the house. And they're armed. Tom and I froze. From the driveway, we heard car doors slam. Voices low, serious. Then, boots on gravel. They were coming. Lisa's voice was urgent. Get out. Now. Tom and I bolted toward the fence. But before we could reach it, a blinding floodlight blasted down on us. And a voice, cold, authoritative, cut through the night. Freeze. We stopped dead. And when we turned around, we were looking at 3 men in tactical gear, armed to the teeth. Lisa's voice crackled in my ear. Guys, I think you just broke into a government black site. And that's when I realized. We were screwed. We were dragged inside. Not handcuffed, but escorted aggressively. And the inside of the house looked nothing like a home. Heavy checkmark no furniture. Heavy checkmark no decorations. Heavy checkmark just metal walls, computer terminals, and security monitors. It was a bunker. They threw us into a cold, gray room with a metal table. Then, the door opened, and a man walked in. Not just any man. The same one who had warned me to stop asking questions. He sat across from me, folded his hands, and stared. I exhaled. So, you gonna kill us or? The man didn't react. You don't know what you've walked into, he said, his voice deadly serious. Tom leaned back. Well, that makes 2 of us. The man's eyes narrowed. Then he slid a folder across the table. It had my name on it, along with Lisa's and Tom's. I glanced at it. So you've been watching us? The man smirked. You have no idea. And then, he flipped the file open. And what I saw inside made my blood run cold. Inside the folder was a photo of my dad, taken yesterday. Tom and Lisa's files had similar photos, our families, our workplaces, our daily routines. Lisa swallowed. What the hell is this? The man leaned forward. We know everything about you. Every email, every text, every phone call. And if you don't walk away from this investigation, we will make sure you regret it. Tom scoffed. Bro, you think threats scare us? We took down an entire HOA. The man's smirk disappeared. This isn't an HOA, he said. This is something bigger than you understand. I clenched my jaw. Then make me understand. The man hesitated. Then he exhaled. And what he told us changed everything. The house wasn't just a safe house. It was a government hideout. And the owner wasn't a billionaire, wasn't a spy, wasn't even a criminal. It was a witness. A former CIA operative who had turned on his own agency. And now he was in hiding, protected by a secret government division. That's why they were watching us. Because by snooping around, we had just stumbled into a classified operation. And if we didn't back off, we wouldn't just be in trouble. We'd be dead. Lisa, Tom, and I sat in that cold, gray interrogation room, staring at the man across from us. We had just learned the truth. Heavy checkmark the house was a government safe house. Heavy checkmark the owner was a former CIA operative in hiding. Heavy checkmark, and we had stumbled into something far bigger than we could handle. The man folded his hands. You have one choice, he said. Walk away. Forget everything you've seen. Go back to your normal lives. Lisa swallowed. Tom tensed. I looked him straight in the eye. And if we don't? The man didn't blink. Then you'll disappear. Silence. Then? I nodded. All right, I said. We're done asking questions. Lisa exhaled. Yeah, we're out. Tom hesitated. Fine, he muttered. But I still think this is some men in black bullsh *T. The man studied us. Then, finally, he nodded. Good, he said. And just like that, we were escorted out of the house. By the next morning, the black SUVs were gone. The house was empty. No more guards. No more cameras. No sign anyone had ever lived there. It was as if the entire operation had vanished overnight. Lisa crossed her arms. Well, that's unsettling. Tom sighed. I don't know whether to feel relieved or disappointed. I exhaled. We let it go. And they let us live. Because the truth? Some things aren't meant to be uncovered. And for once, I was okay with that. A month later, I got one last surprise. A small package, no return address. Inside, a single envelope. I opened it, and inside was a photo of Karen, taken inside a federal prison. No note, no explanation, just proof that she was exactly where she belonged. I smirked, because in the end, I had won. The HOA? Gone. Karen? Gone. Philip? Ruined. And the mystery of the safe house? Buried. Forever. And if another nightmare neighbor ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with.